Charles Foran got to know Mordecai Richler through his engaging novels and his Oscar-nominated screenplays. The complexity and richness of Mordecai's life tempted Foran to write a big, rich book about Mordecai's big, rich life. The book is nominated for BC's National Award for Canadian Nonfiction, and it is my pleasure to welcome Charlie Foran to Studio 4 to tell us more.
Good morning, Fanny.
Nice to see you.
Pleasure to see you.
So, 700 pages or more.
It's a full-figured book.
You noticed. How long did it take you?
It took me 4 years, which is enough, but it's not extreme for this size project. And there's sort of a history of biographers going too far down the well of their subject and spending 8-10 years and becoming lost and winding up disliking their subject. And all sorts of things can go awry when you become that intimate with someone. So I thought 4 years was about right to produce a book of this size.
Sure, and things can go awry if you do not have the blessing of the family and the friends, but you did.
I needed that, or I wanted that. To write the book I wanted to write, I wasn't going to write the book if his friends and family didn't wish me to. It wasn't because it was going to be authorized. It was never authorized. But what I wanted was a book that captured his largeness of character, and in a sense even the largeness and the outsized qualities of his books. And they're full of people. They're full of these outrageous characters, these funny people. And I knew they were his friends. And so if I wasn't going to get those people, I was going to wind up with some anemic little biography. And you just couldn't do that for Mordecai Richler. It had to do justice to him.
Well, you said, or someone said, every piece of Richler prose contains something of his personality, no matter what form it takes.
Exactly. And that was really an extraordinary quality of him as a man and as a writer, is that he couldn't deliver the weather without informing it with his sensibility. Wry, sardonic, existential, sharp, humorous. So yes, he was always Mordecai, in under all circumstances.
Sure, a bracing mix of, you said this, intelligence, irascibility, candor. Tell me about the difference between the public man and the private man.
It was quite significant, and when I started the project, I really only knew the public man, because I only met him a few times when I was younger and living in Montreal, and just in social context, and he was not a garrulous fella. So they were very modest exchanges, so I didn't really know him. So I came to the project with this sense of the public Mordecai Richler, who could be tough, could even be a little rude, could be a little abrupt with people.
And a little rumpled.
A little rumpled, and seemed to be, nurturing the scotch, nurturing the cigar, all those things we all grew up with and came to love about the public persona. The private man I had to find out about, and that was a lovely journey over the course of the 4 years, because what you do is you accrue, in a sense, evidence based on repeatedly hearing the same things about someone. So I interviewed more than 100 people, and I kept hearing the same things. He was a mensch, he was a good guy, he was a loving father, a devoted friend, an adoring husband. And this came to me again and again from different sources. So that's how I came to this portrait of the private man, who was this essentially a very decent, kind-hearted person, if resolutely taciturn and quiet.
Very serious at times, certainly man of great opinion. When this began, was there anybody who said to you, couldn't stand the man, won't talk about him?
A few, and I wanted more. I sent out more than 100 requests for substantial interviews that were going to take a couple hours or maybe even two sessions. I was turned down 3 times. And in a sense, I was worried about that, because I realized I wasn't getting enough of the enemies. I had the friends, I had the family, I had the colleagues, I had the acquaintances. I didn't have enough of the enemies. The enemies, for whatever reason, took the fifth with me. And I think in part because even though Mordecai Richler's 9 years in the grave, he still is a fairly sizable figure in Canada due to his family, due to his friends, his associates. So I think they just still didn't want to be on record.
Sure, I understand that.
You do? Okay.
Somebody's brilliant and fearless, and his family lives on in literary circles, as you know so well. Take me back to his origins. Son of a scrapyard dealer?
That's right. The Richler family was were scrap dealing people. His mother's side were quite different. They were rabbinical. His grandfather was the leading Hasidic rabbi in Montreal, or called a rebbe. So he grew up with this sort of bifurcated sense of his identity, which was the practical, hard-nosed business Richlers, a huge clan. They number in the hundreds now, hundreds and hundreds in Montreal alone. And then the Rosenbergs. But he was raised in a very unhappy house. His father was the oldest son of this scrap dealer clan, but was not considered the firstborn in that regard. So
this is Moses.
This is Moses, someone he was quite fond of, but he was, in a sense, an unsuccessful man and not a very engaged father, and was husband to an arranged marriage that did not work at all. So it wasn't a happy house. But it had this, on the one side, what the Jewish would call yiches, which is this Talmudic heritage which grants you status. On the other side, this mercenary, monetary side. And I think Richler actually contained both those things.
So the marriage was loveless, you suggest. Lily and Moses eventually divorced.
Mordecai was 13 when she threw Moses out. Her name was Lily Rosenberg, as you say, and she threw her husband out when he was 13, and it kind of blew up his childhood. And one of the things I uncovered was, in a sense, the narrative line from what happened when he was 13 on St. Urban Street and how it affected him for the rest of his life. And it revolves around this letter he wrote to his mother about what he witnessed in that apartment after she had expelled the husband.
And what a magnificent writer he was even then.
As a boy.
As a boy.
He was born to it. He was born to a lot of things. He was a born troublemaker. He was a born iconoclast. And I think he was a born writer, even though he started out under the impression he might be a cartoonist or a visual artist. But he was always, I think, going to be a writer.
Well, is it true he wrote Apprenticeship of Dirty Kravitz when he was about 28?
It came out when he was 28. It was his fourth book. His first novel was published when he was 22.
Right.
In London with a significant new publisher, and it was published in many different languages. So this kid had it. Now, he didn't discover his voice until Duddy. So he's around 27, and in the biography I track what leads him to become himself on the page, and what it is he becomes funny. He isn't funny in the first 3 books, if you can believe it. He finds funny, and he finds the woman of his life in his dreams, and that becomes his second wife, Florence, of 41 years until his death. And this all coincides around the year 1957-58, and he gives birth to maybe the first major Canadian novel, Dirty Kravitz.
Okay, so before Florence, he escaped to Paris.
He did.
Wouldn't we all like to do that?
And he very much was following that cliche, if you will. The young man goes to Paris and tries to,
The Ghost of Gertrude Stein.
Oh, it goes way back. James Joyce, Morley Callahan, fist fights with Hemingway, all that stuff. It was a great narrative, expats in Paris. And Richter, like almost any other callow, ambitious young man full of yearning, life was elsewhere. Literary life was not in Canada in the 1940s. It was in Europe, or New York. And he went to Europe, and he did his apprenticeship, if you will, first in Spain, then in Paris, and finally in London.
When we come back, I want to talk about the love affair that was between, the great love affair between Florence and Mordecai. Flo. He called her Flo?
He did call her Flo.
Okay. We'll return with Charles Foran, The Life and Times, Mordecai Richler.